Well, here we go again. CNN is being sued by Project Veritas over statements made by Anna Cabrera and reinforced by Brian Stetler in a broadcast where they were discussing the bannings of various entities and people on social media. In specific, they said that Veritas was banned over spreading misinformation, a claim that Veritas says is absolutely false and is saying that CNN knows is false. Let's take a look at all this. Let's talk about what's going on in this lawsuit. Remember that Veritas is also suing Twitter and the New York Times for similar type statements, and we'll be watching all of it. I'm Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. I'm a lawyer, but I'm also a legal and political commentator here on YouTube. If you like that stuff, if you're interested in that kind of news, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any videos. All right, so here we go. James O'Keefe, this is from the Project Veritas website where they have announced the lawsuit. It was allegedly filed yesterday. I will be following along to see how that goes. Look, lawsuits take a long time to go through. I mean, we're talking about year-plus long processes for the whole thing. But at the beginning, there tends to be kind of a flurry activity with the lawsuit, with the service of the lawsuit, with the responses from the other party. And then they enter into a phase called discovery. And that is really what Project Veritas seems to be after on all of these organizations. I mean, sure, they want to win, obviously. Winning the lawsuits is important, and they have a meritorious purpose. They're being defamed. They're being misrepresented, and that misrepresentation is hurting them, allegedly, so they want to go ahead and bring these lawsuits to bring the defamers to task. But if you notice, in Veritas's sort of promotional content about these lawsuits, including what's on the screen right now, you'll see stuff like hashtag depose CNN, hashtag depose Twitter, hashtag depose the New York Times. They're after the discovery process, and depositions are a big part of it. There's nothing that says these depositions can't be made public outside of a specific court order, and so it seems like what Project Veritas is wanting to do, and this is pretty open, I'm not drawing massive insight here. What they're wanting to do is to depose employees and agents of these various companies, specifically big media and big tech companies, get them on the record and under oath to talk about what's going on. In a deposition, you have the leeway to ask quite a broad range of questions you wouldn't be able to necessarily ask in a courtroom. You're allowed to dig for a little bit more information as long as that information is in any way relevant to the case. Now, when you're in a courtroom, your questions have to not only be relevant, but they also have to be non-prejudicial, and they have to do all sorts of stuff because you're in front of a fact finder, and you can't ask improper questions to attempt to influence the fact finder's viewpoint. But in deposition, you're not in front of a fact finder. You get to ask pretty much whatever you want, and they are under oath. Having someone under oath and on video is some of the best reporting that you can do, right? Because there's a penalty if they flat out lie about something. So this is a huge and obvious and open goal of Project Veritas as well. Let's expose these people through depositions. And that is a noble endeavor that anyone should be able to get behind. Putting news organizations under oath, where they don't get to hide behind their fake credibility, where they don't get to hide behind, credit that they built up 50, 60 years ago and have been trying to ride the wave of, where they don't get to push their agenda without at least being forced to be truthful about what they're saying. You can actually ask them about their agenda, about why they would want to say that Project Veritas is spreading misinformation, about why they're trying to discredit various competitors to theirs that don't maybe subscribe to their ideology or their journalistic lens. We'll put it that way. We'll put it the nice way, their journalistic lens. We get to ask them these types of questions in deposition, and that's what Project Veritas wants to do. So here we go. Here is, let's read the bullet points by Project Veritas. Then we're going to jump over to the document and I'll show you kind of the statement that they're after. James O'Keefe announced today that Project Veritas has filed a lawsuit against CNN in Atlanta, Georgia federal court over defamatory statements made on air. It says today, this is actually yesterday on the 26th. CNN anchor Ana Cabrera said Veritas' suspension from Twitter was part of a much broader crackdown by social media giants on accounts that were promoting misinformation. Project Veritas' Twitter account was in fact taken down, but for supposed privacy violations according to Twitter. Even Cabrera previously tweeted that Veritas' ban from Twitter was the result of alleged privacy violations, proving she knew what she subsequently reported was false. Okay, let's take a pause there. This is really, really important to the case. In fact, you've just gotten the main summary of the case. Here's the document. We're not going to go into it because it's all in these bullet points, but let's pause for a minute. Defamation is a false statement of fact said to another person that causes damage to the person that it's about, right? So Ana Cabrera made a statement of fact that Project Veritas was sued for spreading misinformation. Long story short, that's the gist of her statement. So that is a factual statement because there is a specific reason that Project Veritas was banned from Twitter. So we know that there is a reason. That reason is knowable. And in fact, Ana Cabrera knows the reason because she talked about it previously, that Project Veritas is alleged to have violated someone's privacy. Now, they also say, Project Veritas says that they didn't do anything of the sort, and in fact, CNN has done the exact same thing that Project Veritas is accused of doing, and their tweets are all conveniently still up. So this isn't a weird thing. What Project Veritas is accused of doing is going to someone's house, in this case, a board member or an executive at Facebook, knocking on their door and attempting to get them to answer some questions while recording it. They posted that video up on Twitter, and Twitter said that that was a violation of privacy because reasons. Presumably, the reason is because it's showing the front door of someone's house. I say presumably because, like I said, CNN has videos up of them doing the exact same thing. Very recently, in fact, a different news organization did the exact same thing to a paramedic who donated to the Kyle Rittenhouse Defense Fund. Went to his house, took photos and video of the front door, and posted it on Twitter. That tweet, to my knowledge, is still up. CNN has done this. Several news organizations have done this. I'm not a big fan of the practice, but hey, it is what it is. It's up there. Twitter doesn't have a problem with it when it comes from CNN, but apparently when it comes from Project Veritas, and maybe more appropriately when it's going after an executive over at Facebook, Twitter suddenly has an interest in protecting privacy. That being said, that's what Project Veritas was allegedly removed for, is that it had nothing to do with quote unquote promoting misinformation according to Twitter. So we have a fact statement. Why were they banned? We have a knowable outcome of that statement. They were banned either for spreading misinformation or they were banned for violations of privacy or some other rule. Twitter said it was for a violation of privacy. Ana Cabrera said it was for a violation of privacy. And then later, Ana Cabrera said that it was promoting misinformation. So we have a statement made by Ana Cabrera, who is CNN for all purposes of the lawsuit. Now we have that statement being a fact statement, why they were removed. Now, does it cause damage? Or, well, was it made to a third party, I should say? If she told Project Veritas why they were suspended, it wouldn't be defamatory. So was it made to a third party? Yes. Yes, she's speaking about it on CNN and a video broadcast to at least tens of people. Who knows? Who knows who watches CNN anymore? I have no idea. But in bank lobbies all over the world, this was broadcast to maybe someone waiting to get a checking account. It doesn't matter. At least one other person heard it. It was stated on broadcast news. So, since it was made to a third person in public, now we have to ask, does this statement cause damage? Project Veritas says that saying that they're promoting misinformation as a news organization is inherently damaging. It's inherently damaging. That makes it defamation per se. They're attacking them in their trade. They're talking about a critical characteristic of a news organization, which is their credibility and their truthfulness. And they're saying that by spreading misinformation, or by accusing them of spreading misinformation, that is inherently damaging to their brand, and therefore this would be defamatory per se. Now, in the case of Project Veritas or a James O'Keefe or any other sort of very public figure or media figure, you have an additional step, and that is showing actual malice, which is knowledge of the falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. So the 4 things I mentioned earlier, those are the basic elements of defamation. Then you have to prove their level of culpability. Was it negligent if you're a normal sort of private individual, or was it made with actual malice? Was that knowledge of the falsity or reckless disregard for the truth? That's sort of the 5th element that they'll have to prove, because Project Veritas is a public figure for the purposes here. Now, public figure doctrine is a very kind of complicated area of law, but let's just say for the purposes of this issue, it's pretty clear that Project Veritas is at least a public figure in a limited capacity, and that means they have to show the actual malice. Knowledge of the falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. Well, they're showing knowledge of the falsity because they're showing that Ana Cabrera reported on the truth, which is the alleged privacy violation previous to this broadcast. And in this broadcast, she said it was for spreading misinformation and put Project Veritas in. Now, there's a more complicated question in general, and that is an extra sort of layer of shielding that news organizations get. And this is the big hurdle that Project Veritas will have to overcome in this case, is that news organizations are allowed to make some false statements in the conduct of reporting on an overall issue. It's called having the gist of the issue being defamatory or not. And what they want is, this is sort of a carve out by the courts over time to allow news stories or news reporting organizations the ability to report on news without worrying about being sued over one incorrect fact. They want to cover whether the overall statements about the person were defamatory or not. So if you get a fact or 2 wrong here and there, it's not necessarily defamatory. This is one statement taken out of a segment. And Project Veritas is going to have to show, and I think they can do this, but this is the hurdle that they have to overcome. They're going to have to show that the segment about Project Veritas is limited in scope to this discussion that Ana Cabrera and Brian Stetler had, although having a discussion with Brian Stetler is kind of like talking to a baked potato. But that being said, they had a discussion anyway, and they have to show that during that discussion, the limited conversation about Veritas was limited to this issue, and that there's not some broader narrative that they're talking about where they get away with making some misstatement about Veritas. And I think they can do that here. The context of the discussion is about tech giants banning various organizations. However, Project Veritas is the one that's mentioned specifically, and the only factual statement made about Project Veritas is that they were suspended for promoting misinformation, which they've already shown they know to be incorrect. Now, Veritas reached out to CNN, demanded a retraction. CNN said no, they're not going to retract it. So Veritas is bringing the suit. So here we go. Back to this. CNN's own reporter, Brian Fung, followed up with Twitter and Project Veritas about the ban and reported that the account had been banned for privacy violations. A CNN clip that closely resembles the Veritas video used as justification for the ban has been allowed to remain up on Twitter's platform. I talked about that a little bit ago. This lawsuit comes on the heels of Veritas' historic legal victory against the New York Times, defeating the newspaper's motion to dismiss in the New York Supreme Court. We'll talk about that in just a second. And Veritas is also suing Twitter for defamation, expects discovery and depositions to follow, which will help uncover the truth. Now, Veritas is suing Twitter and New York Times in New York. They overcame the New York Times motion to dismiss under New York's recently added anti-slapp law, or I should say recently updated anti-slapp law, and they did pass that initial hurdle. So that's good news for Project Veritas. They are suing Twitter, I believe, in New York as well, and they will still have to overcome the anti-slapp statute there on for Twitter. If they're able to actually sue Twitter in New York, if you check out my video about that lawsuit, there's some questions about whether that jurisdiction is proper. We'll see that going forward. CNN, they are suing in federal court. CNN is headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, and they are suing them in the federal court there in Atlanta. And so with this, they're going to have a different sort of approach because there isn't a federal anti-slapp statute. And the circuit courts have been reluctant to apply state anti-slapp statutes to federal cases. So they're probably not going to have to do that here. They will have to overcome a basic motion to dismiss, but they don't have to go over the sort of enhanced hurdle of following the anti-slapp motion to dismiss that they had to go after in New York. They just have to go overcome the regular motion to dismiss, which will be filed in this case, because pretty much everyone in a civil case is going to file a motion to dismiss. CNN will claim that they failed to state a claim for which relief can be granted. It's called a 12B6 motion. We'll see that coming up in the near future, and we'll be reporting on how that goes. So that is what's been going on with Project Veritas. They're getting very litigious and very busy lately. They have a pretty good track record of winning lawsuits, getting retractions, and they have a giant wall of shame with all of them at their offices. So we'll have to see if these 3 recent lawsuits actually make it to the wall of shame or not. But I would humbly suggest that Project Veritas is most concerned with getting those depositions out of these organizations and getting those depositions out to the public so the public can hear what CNN, Twitter, and the New York Times think of them. What do you think? Drop a comment down below. If you like this type of coverage, if you know people who care about this stuff, share it around. Let them know what's going on. Until next time, I'll talk to you then. Peace. Peace.